Coming to the end of day 2 of the SAIT annual tax Indaba, we absolutely could not close the day without speaking to Keitumetse, the acting deputy CEO for SAIT. Keitu, thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Thank you for having me, Jashwin.
Keitu, I think a very important question would be, well, what is the process that SAIT undergoes when curating the topics for these tax Indabas?
Excellent question. So we presuppose our questions upon major fiscal events. So generally we wait until the budget is released for us to understand what is the trajectory or direction of the country when it comes to fiscal and policy and operational matters. This year was quite challenging because, as you would appreciate, we had budget 1.0. We thought we'd be ready in Feb with the program, and we had to go back in March, and we didn't understand what was going on then. So earlier on May, did we have some sort of indication of what the fiscal policy framework was going to be for the country? So we look at what South Africa is generally doing, and then we cascade that into topics. What we do is look at the wide range of people who come to this sort of event. So we've got members from solo practitioners right across the board to being people in parliament or people in SARS who are trainees actually, and people that we engage with in the firms, both from audit firms or law firms. So we curate the topics in mind to think of what would a tax advisor who's an expert in this field still gain from coming to the tax Indaba and talking about a topic that they probably have discussed ad nauseum. And then we have to look at the solo practitioner, that this particular solo practitioner might not have heard about Pillar 2 before in their lives. So how do we balance those types of nuances? And we look at topics that generally everybody can contribute. So the type of topics that we have here is something that you can discuss over the braai with your friends or even in the boardroom with your partners. And those are the guiding North Stars that we look at when we put the program together.
I'd just like to put it out there. I've never discussed fat at a braai with friends.
Unfortunately.
But here we are.
Here we
Now, what we've seen historically, and I mean, I think this is probably my 5th or 6th tax Indaba, but I typically tend to find that day 3 is your most wide-reaching topics, and it is typically, disputes. Historically, we've done a couple on e-filing functionality problems. It's your tax debts, your collections. It's the things that is basically a taxpayer's bread and butter. And obviously tomorrow we'll see that if it follows that trend, we'll probably be exceptionally busy. But from those key topics, your wide-reaching stuff, and from your perspective, what do you think is probably the most relevant to tax practitioners, especially if we are now looking at SARS's collection drives, their strategic objectives, and their use of AI?
Excellent question. So day 3 is generally our most populous day because that's where we delve with the topics that tax practitioners deal with. The topics that we're looking forward to, SARS debt collection, it spans across the range. So from advisor to solo practitioner, that's a topic that's definitely going to be up everybody's alley, the use of AI and how, SARS's strategic goals in their purpose of their Vision 2030 feed into what tax practitioners do. So generally the third day where we focus on tax administration, where we focus on what solo practitioners do is where we focus our core. Unfortunately, we have it on the third day. We would have it on the first day, but we try to paint the bigger picture on the first day and then delineate. But actually, that's great feedback. Perhaps next year we should switch it up and have the international tax discussion and the domestic tax discussion on a Wednesday, on the third day, and have the bread and butter of tax practitioners on the Tuesday. But what goes into the board rationale there is that tax administration is huge, and that's why we have to have a separate day right at the end because generally our members can't come for the full 3 days or at the beginning of the week because people have meetings and people have to, submit requests for proposals and meet clients. So that is why we chose that specific day at the end in order to discuss those pertinent topics. It's not just an afterthought.
No, 100%. I mean, maybe next year we switch it up. We do a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and let the Friday conversation from the bread and butter flow into a drinks or a dinner and a networking event. Now, we've obviously got, I mean, something you mentioned earlier, we've got the transfer pricing segment tomorrow and the Pillar 2. Now, in light of Pillar 2 and the global minimum tax bill being passed earlier this year, from your members, and I mean, based on what the global minimum tax is, you would probably be looking more at your master tax practice, your chartered advisors.
Yes.
Has there been any significant inflow of queries through SAIT's helpline?
Definitely not in Pillar 2, unfortunately. I don't think this is the type of information that our members deal with on a day-by-day basis. Notwithstanding that, we find it pertinent that we include those topics. So you'd have noted from day one, we had Professor Keith Engel chair that panel where we spoke about, the effect of the U.S. executive order that was issued in January with, the United States pulling out of the global tax deal. We delved into the aspects of Pillar 2 specifically. In transfer pricing, we'll also touch on that tomorrow. So unfortunately, we don't see those queries coming through. I have the privilege of dealing with our work group members, who are usually in the audit firms or the law firms. We delineate and we discuss it. We've even had a webinar with Ruben Johannes from Deloitte unpacking the global minimum tax in quite a lot of detail. But this is the type of conversation that we want to have in a forum like this, where we have our solo practitioners who are here physically and virtually and unpack those topics that even though you might not engage, with the global minimum tax, you don't know this 15%, you don't understand, the QDMTT, but you're here and you can have a snapshot of what it is. Hopefully that will spark some interest and then you can engage with the professionals and we provide you more information. I think the honest aim that we're trying to look at is to pre-position our members to have the effective knowledge that they can be a competent tax professional, notwithstanding that certain issues are out of their realm of expertise.
No, absolutely. And I think probably in closing, just your sentiment on, well, SARS is currently putting a lot of resources behind collections. Rightfully so. I mean, there's 513 billion in outstanding taxes. And that was after they wrote off 36.5 billion last year. Now, what do tax practitioners need to be mindful of when engaging with either SARS's debt management team or with collectors on behalf of their clients?
Well, you need to know that the data letters are not going anywhere. You'd have known from Budget 3.0 that the minister did say that if SARS is capacitated, they give them additional revenue. And SARS can collect the money that's due to the fiscus. They might collect about 20, 30 billion rand. There might be no need for us to raise taxes next year, which is the conundrum that they're faced with because people don't want taxes to rise. They want money collected. So we need to understand that we cannot run away from debt collection. There are major initiatives that the commissioner and the deputy commissioner have put in place to actually look for the money that is due to the fiscus that needs to be in here so as not to burden those who are already compliant taxpayers. So overall, they're not going to go away. It is incumbent upon you as a tax professional. We look forward to the panel that you will be part of tomorrow to educate our members as to what are the debt collection mechanisms, what rights do you have in the process, what initiates the process. Unfortunately, now SARS is seen as the big bad guy when it comes to collection and they're going to take my money. We had a member come into our office and we spoke for like 2 hours about how a specific client that she's working on, SARS just garnished the bank account, 200K is gone. The poor guy can't work. They can't get into payment arrangements. It's really a quagmire in there. So SARS is going to intensify their efforts because they've got a target of 2.006 trillion. It's not going to go away after expending refunds. And they need to meet that target and collect the revenue on behalf of the fiscus. But as taxpayers, and we look forward to you unpacking the session tomorrow with your panelists, you need to understand that you can, come to the table with SARS. There are mechanisms in which SARS should rightfully be collecting debt, but not to the detriment of taxpayers. But debt will be collected.
Yeah, correct. I mean, we've seen a massive uptick in SARS issuing personal liability. And I think one key point that we must definitely unpack tomorrow would be, well, understanding the difference between personal liability and a tax act, which is a very straightforward process for SARS to impose, versus in the ordinary course of the courts. And yeah, I mean, SARS just resourced, I think, 1,700 individuals. We've seen some very interesting email signatures recently. SARS Center of Excellence, a graduate trainee, and they're now engaging taxpayers. So it's a little bit of a case of potentially the blind leading the blind.
Yes.
But I mean, and SARS have said it themselves. Well, they've put a few billion into resourcing, rightfully so, to collect many billions, Project Alma billions. It's exactly that.
Exactly. Unfortunately, we do find, and when we speak to members on the ground, that they also feel that SARS, exactly as you say, is the blind leading the blind. They don't know what they're doing, but they're just here to collect the money, and therefore they're acting outside of the confines of the law and what they can do, and just proper relationship management when it comes to debt. The type of relationship that taxpayers want with debt is the relationship that MNEs have with the LBI, right? But unfortunately, the target is the target. So while we do appreciate that SARS is capacitated and got the 1.7 people, education is going to be key. So they understand what they're doing. But we too also have to educate our members. And that panel, one of the panels that we have put together, is going to unpack just that, to empower the tax practitioner, the SAIT tax practitioner, to be able to withstand any pressure from SARS.
And that is exactly why we have SAIT, we have the CPD Consortium to promote taxpayer education. Keitumetse, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us.
Thank you for having me.